Good afternoon. I'm Zoya Raynes, President of the Jewish Communal Fund and a trustee of UJA-Federation of New York. I want to welcome our JCF fund holders and UJA-Federation supporters to the webinar. We thank you for the generosity you've shown throughout the crisis and for helping our organizations have a significant impact on the community's well-being. Today is the final segment of JCF's three-part webinar series, Responding to the Coronavirus Crisis. Previously, we've heard from Naam Paley Rose of Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors about strategies employed by large foundations and major funders, along with guidance for donors of all sizes to assist with informed funding decisions. We also heard from the philanthropic advisors at Good Nation, who explained how their digital philanthropic platform, combined with personal consultations, can help donors respond more effectively to the crisis and current societal needs. Both of these webinars are available on our website. Today, you will learn about the Jewish communal response to the COVID crisis from experts at UJA-Federation of New York, Met Council, and SelfHelp. And I'm certain you will be proud through that your support, the vital contribution that you've been able to give towards this effort. It's now my pleasure to introduce AB Bressman, President of the Board of Trustees of UJA-Federation of New York.
Thank you so much, Zoya. I am very honored to be with all of you and to have the opportunity to share how UJA has responded to the pandemic. And as Zoya said, I hope that you feel as I do, so proud to be a part of something that makes a difference in the world around us. I'll use this time to tell you where we are to date, how we made those decisions, and what I see happening in the months ahead. In addition to our $133 million, which we approximately allocate each year, we added an additional $56 million in emergency grants and loans to meet the immediate and urgent needs created by the pandemic. Our mission and our values stand for basically helping our community. And we divide this into two broad categories: social services and Jewish life. Keeping this central in our decision-making process, we proceeded with our funding in multiple phases. On the social service side, we saw that people were in desperate need of food. We dramatically enhanced digital food pantry capacity, all food pantry capacities, and found a way for meal delivery to homebound seniors and Holocaust survivors. We significantly increased mental health services, provided emergency cash assistance for vulnerable New Yorkers, and we made the decision to treat all of the members of our community in life and in death with dignity, providing burials for anyone who needed them. In the area of Jewish life, we provided emergency support to our JCCs, Jewish day and overnight camps, day schools, synagogues, and campus hillels. And at all times, we kept in mind, when the pandemic is behind us, we want to make sure there is a Jewish infrastructure intact that will allow each member of our community to have a meaningful Jewish journey. These decisions were made in phases, with each phase representing a thoughtful, strategic approach to the situation at hand. In phase one, in the first few weeks of the pandemic, we did not panic. We responded with a steady and thoughtful hand. We focused on the continuity of critical services, food distribution, case management, home, and healthcare. And we responded to emergencies that we saw that had not previously existed, getting PPE out there and making sure that there was more food in our system. In this phase, what we decided to do was create a lay crisis management team, a senior leadership group that regularly reviewed the situation and continually made focused and strategic decisions about funding. We collected data weekly. We did this through two ways. We were in touch with all of our agency executives by cohorts. For example, all JCC directors, all human service directors. And in each week, we had a weekly review of where they are and how they were feeling. And we included in that an additional meeting with the program directors. So we assembled senior service directors, camp directors, Hillel directors, etc. And we felt that this was our way of being truly in touch with facts on the ground. Then phase 2 began, which evolved after the first few weeks of an emergency. And this was our recalibration phase. And in this phase, our priorities were the stabilization of all of our agencies. We made the decision to give our agencies some breathing room, some time and some space to make good decisions. We focused on ongoing response to emergency needs, housing for victims of domestic violence, how we got Passover food to those who needed it, and once again, to make sure that we had the money to cover funeral costs. And in this phase, we began building systematic solutions, purchasing an additional food warehouse, mobilizing our volunteers in new and massive ways, and creating a collective to buy PPE. We worked hard with philanthropic partnerships. We joined coalitions, we advocated, and made sure that what we needed was registered with all of our government contacts. And we made scenario planning available not only internally, but to each of the agencies that we are involved with. And in this phase, we also created the appointment of relationship managers. Each agency executive was assigned a UJA professional for a weekly check-in call. Weekly, we did pulse surveys, short, focused electronic surveys to extract vital and specific information. And we started to create assessments, formal surveys administered on a bi-monthly basis to all core partners and strategic allies to help track changes and to make sure that we understood the impact of the pandemic each and every week. And we helped our agencies all make cash flow projections. And what I feel so proud about in this phase is that we actually offered concrete assistance to those agencies and organizations that really needed us in that moment. In this phase, we also addressed some time-sensitive issues. We looked at camps. What are we going to need to do so that camps that are so vital to the Jewish life of our children exist next summer? And how are we going to help overnight camps? We also took a look at what we're going to do about Israel experiences so that when next summer comes, it is going to be possible for trips to Israel. We looked at high holidays. What should we do to make high holiday services safe for those synagogues who want to meet in small groups, for those synagogues who want to meet outside? How can we assist them in doing that? And we also talked to agencies about their reopening plans. We tried to see what we could do to be of assistance to any agency who wanted to open safely and to all of the day schools that wanted to open safely. We also began adjusting our reporting requirements. We wanted to help our agencies be able to get us information in a way that did not burden them. So we created a series of 4 questions that made reporting back to us much simpler. And in this period, we revised our fiscal 21 budget recommendations to understand and be very focused on how we could continue to respond to the crisis and its long-term impact. We are continuing to utilize these disciplined and strategic approaches for our funding as we face this present moment. The needs continue to be dramatic and actually elevated. 16% of New Yorkers are currently unemployed, compared to just 4% last year. More than 1.5 million New Yorkers are food insecure, compared to 1 million last year. And in New York City, households affected by job loss, 73% feel depressed or hopeless, and only 11% feel hopeful for the future. In terms of the impact on our agencies, 54% of our partner agencies are in budgetary crisis right now, and they have anticipated revenue shortfall within the next 6 months or sooner. And the situation seems to be the most severe for the JCCs. 80% of JCCs reported an anticipated revenue shortfall within 6 months. And I think when we think about that, of course, we can understand that JCCs operate on fees for the services they provide, and now they can hardly provide any of those services. So how are we handling this? How are we responding to what I just told you? One of the ways I think we are doing that is at looking at additional ways to get funding to those in needs. In addition to our traditional grants and loans, and we are sharing what we are learning to be focused expertise and best practices. We're working with more volunteers and many more partnerships. We're continuing to track and analyze the data. We're convening our nonprofit partners. We're fostering collaboration, and we're giving tangible and good suggestions. And I believe we are making a difference. One of the incredible ways we are making this happen is through our newly opened Queens Hub. And this is a model for absolutely changing the trajectory of people's lives. And JCF was an incredible partner in making this happen. With your help, you turned a rundown lime green bowling alley, bar, and pool hall into a dignified, multi-purpose space. In this 9,600 square foot space that people can walk into, we have the expertise of many of our UJA partners under one roof to provide coordinated, compassionate support as people struggle with the economic and emotional fallout of the pandemic. They are trained there for jobs, and we are working hard to have them change the trajectory of their lives. They meet with social workers who connect them to a full range of supports they need, all in one location. There is assistance for benefits enrollment, legal services, financial guidance, access to interest-free loans, emotional support, and much more. And they're able to select food through a digital pantry, which gives them power over their choices and helps them think of themselves in a new way. They get what they need for their families. And most importantly, every single person who walks through that door is treated with dignity and compassion. They begin to see themselves in a new way, a way forward, a way upward. The Queens Hub is now a model for 6 satellite hubs that we're opening throughout our region next month. I have to say again how grateful we are to the Jewish Communal Fund for supporting the digital food pantry in the hub and as we move forward. That gift, which came at such a critical time, made all of this possible because of the wonderful partnership that we share between UJA and JCF and the Special Gift Fund. We are able to provide food for those in need, care for Holocaust survivors. We were able to deliver Seder meals to thousands of homebound community members. And we support absolutely safe and possible socialization opportunities for our seniors. I think that I'm just going to say on a personal note, when I learned of the gift that came from the Special Gift Fund through JCF, I actually thought that there was an angel out there who was listening and heard how desperately we needed the money at that moment. From the bottom of my heart, I will always be so grateful for the decision that was made by that Special Gift Fund. Actually, later we're going to hear from the person who chairs that fund. But for now, while I have created an overview for you, I thought it was critical that you hear directly from those on the front lines of this crisis and how they are dealing day by day by day with what they are seeing. So it is a great honor for me to welcome and include in our conversation Stuart Kaplan, CEO of SelfHelp Community Services, the largest provider of Holocaust survivor services in North America, and Jessica Chait, who is the Managing Director of Food Programs at Met Council, which among many other social services runs the largest kosher food pantry system in North America. Their leadership throughout the pandemic has been deeply inspiring. They have been there since day one and have worked tirelessly to care for some of our community's most vulnerable members. They also both epitomize the absolute collaboration that I believe UJA makes possible. And together we are solving solutions. Together we are solving problems with creative solutions. I want to thank them both for taking out the time to be here. They work very hard and every minute is precious. So I want to begin by asking them both the same question. And Jessica, we'll start with you for the answer. But the question that I want to ask you is, what needs are you seeing now? And what are you anticipating in the winter months ahead? So Jessica, if you might go first with that question.
Great, thank you, Amy. And thank you to everyone for joining on this call. We're so incredibly grateful to the Jewish Communal Fund and to UJA-Federation for really the lifeline of support that you've offered truly always, but particularly since the start of the pandemic. As we both reflect on where we're coming and where we're going, I want to just share that we are fully operating. While we are the largest provider of kosher food in the country, we are bigger than even our own expectations or past experience. We are now operating on an average of 350% more food distributed each month than the month in the prior year. And this is just far and away. I mean, if you were a business operating at 350%, you'd be celebrating, popping champagne. Sadly, this is in response to just the overwhelming, tremendous need. But I do believe we can celebrate insofar as that we have been able to meet this need and step up every piece of the way. We are particularly concerned, today is a perfect day as an example, a cold day, as we look to really making sure that our pantries can continue to operate, that our staff and our colleagues are all safe out there, not just in this cold weather, but in the event that, as we know, many communities are seeing incredibly high increases in the number of COVID cases. And so as we look to protect our staff as well as our clients and all those who turn to us in need, we really are both anticipating sustaining, perhaps even increasing our level of service, and doing so in, again, a very trying environment where not only are people, really nervous about what does it mean if schools close? What does it mean if we hit 3%? What does it mean? When will I be able to go back to my senior center or back to the programs? We saw that kind of fear when we shut down in late March and April, and we're beginning to see clients and frankly our pantry staff and warehousing staff all begin to grapple with this challenge yet again. We also have concerns about, frankly, the COVID fatigue is real in all of us. I know even me personally, I think every night, like, oh my gosh, still we're living with this. But also from donors as well as many of our government partners. No one at city government, much less federal government, anticipated that we would be talking about needing to maintain the level of service and the dollars that go behind that at this time of year. Surely we all had hoped that this would be something that by the summer would abate, and obviously it is not. And so a lot of our government funding is set to expire by the end of this year, really creating a very challenging situation for us as we look forward and as we look to plan, knowing that this 350% increase that I mentioned will continue regardless of whether or not the funds are there to support the work. So as we look ahead, we remain very concerned, but also very diligent in making sure that we can say yes to every request, whether that be from a pantry, another community, nonprofit UJA partner, or frankly, any individual who calls us.
Thank you, Jessica. Stuart, can I get you to weigh in on that as well?
Sure, and thank you, Zoya and Amy, for the inspiring opening. You sort of took me by surprise and engaged me with all that UJA has done, even though I'm pretty close to it, I think. Hearing that comprehensive overview was fantastic, so thank you. The needs at SelfHelp, some are the same now, and some are different. And just quickly, back in the March through May period, when the pandemic began, SelfHelp lost 158 clients. 158 of our clients died. Since May to now, we've only lost 4 more. We've also lost 4 employees. And so in those early months, it was, along with everything else in terms of operating and caring for and providing services, there was a lot of grief counseling, there were memorials, there was all kinds of support that we were providing both to clients and staff. That has, thank goodness, abated somewhat, given the numbers going down. But one of the things that we realized and was exacerbated was the issue of social isolation. And we are all feeling that. We are all feeling it, and for seniors even more so, and for Holocaust survivors even more so. They know all too well what isolation has meant to them in the past, and it did bring up the memories of what it might mean presently. In some respects, I refer to the pandemic as the great equalizer. It is not only for seniors, it is not only for Holocaust survivors, it is for children, it is for all of us who are here today, feeling the isolation. Amy, you made reference to a statistic I hadn't heard before about 73% of people feeling hopeless and helpless, well, exacerbated by the isolation. And as we move into the dark winter, as we refer to it now, how do we respond to that? And one of the things that SelfHelp has been able to do is utilize something that we refer to as the virtual senior center, which goes into the living rooms and kitchens of our older adults who are isolated, who these days more than ever are not able to go out for shopping and visitation with friends and family. And using the internet, very similar to what we have going on right now, we conduct hundreds of classes for older adults facilitated by volunteers with everything from from Jewish humor to discussions about the Holocaust or discussions about current events. Politics is a hot topic these days in every living room. And so the virtual senior center has gone into the homes of Holocaust survivors, and it has been life-saving for many. But more importantly than that one visit, as we are doing today, having a visit together, it creates virtual communities. And so next Tuesday at 11 a.m., the same group of people will come together with the same facilitator, and so on the following Tuesday and thereafter. And people look forward to seeing each other. And just as we have gotten together, I'm sure many of us, with family and friends on some regular basis, okay, on Wednesday nights or for a Shabbat, we all come together and we do it virtually. The same is happening for seniors. And we are all relying upon that, and that is something that SelfHelp has contributed, if you will, to seniors every place. Because of the internet, we're able to do it very broadly. And of course, the needs for PPE and specialized services and mental health. And when I talk about mental health in terms of present day needs, our staff. We should not forget about our staff, the frontline workers who have been there every day throughout to ensure that our clients are receiving the services that they need to receive, regardless of the fact that we are doing it in a different way.
Thank you, Stuart. The next question goes to you as well. I know that I had the opportunity to say how much UJA-Federation appreciates the special gift fund of JCF and those things which it made UJA more capable of accomplishing. And I just wondered if you wanted to reflect on how that gift impacted you at SelfHelp.
Well, deep thanks to UJA and JCF. The partnership of UJA, JCF, and SelfHelp didn't just originate, I might add. As everybody on this call may well know, going back to Defiant Requiem and creating Defiant Requiem 10 years ago, Witness Theater and the Witness Theater documentary, all supported by both UJA and JCF. Thank you. The grants, the emergency grants that we received, and it felt as a CEO in one of the organizations, almost instantaneously, and allowed us to breathe easier. And I think, Amy, again, you alluded to something about letting people take a breath. Was able to provide for us. We all learned those 3 letters early on, PPE. I didn't know what it was in February, but you could be sure I knew what it was in March, as we all did. And being able to receive funding for PPE and pay for the PPE that we needed to obtain in emergency services was one of the areas. Transportation, specialized transportation for our home health aides, the home care workers who go into people's homes and did not stop for one day from March 1 to this very moment, getting them into people's homes, particularly in the early days when there was no mass transportation, and yet these people may be traveling from the Bronx to Queens or Queens to Manhattan, was paying for specialized transportation. And the ECAP money, Emergency Cash Assistance Program, which again, another few letters that are near and dear to us, provided for rental assistance. One of our survivors went out and spent, didn't go out, but ordered in so much PPE, to the tune of almost $1,000 before any funds came forward, such that she then couldn't pay her rent. So we used, as an example, the funds that came through JCF to pay a 1-month stipend to pay the rent because she had stocked up on all of her funds. And another example, and I could talk more about it, but just the virtual senior center, a survivor who spent time in Bergen-Belsen and sort of fled to Sweden, ended up in Brooklyn with her husband, and then was widowed in Brooklyn for many years, who never missed one of SelfHelp's coffee houses. She used to say they are like medicine to her. And yet she was adamant about staying home because she also has home care that's in place for her. She missed seeing people. And so we had to purchase a tablet for her so that she could come on to the virtual senior center. Funds went to that and then multiply that times many other people that were supported.
Thank you, Stuart. And Jessica, I want to give you a chance to comment on the exact same question, how you saw the special fund helping you at Met Council.
Sure, thank you. I really cannot, I can almost hardly believe that what we lived through, and what we're living through, frankly, but the days of March where the requests, literally the phone did not stop ringing, whether that was pantries or UJA partners, literally clients somehow getting my cell phone number and calling me directly. I say often, and I always caveat it by saying, this is in no way to diminish people who have actually been in a war zone, but it felt like a war zone. It felt like every day we were being proverbially shot at and trying to find a way to keep going forward. We had drivers calling out sick. We had food orders, 400,000 pounds of food in mid-March that was scheduled and then canceled a day before it was intended to be delivered, with deliveries at pantries, clients already notified, scheduled for the very next day. We had, Stuart mentioned, like, what was social distancing? What was PPE? We had the living fear of the virus, not knowing how it could be transmitted. It was an incredibly intense time. And we just kept putting one foot in front of another, hoping that the donor community, that our family and friends at UJA and at JCF would be there, because this is the work that we talk about doing. This was our 9/12 moment after 9/11, being there. And when we received the call that the funding had been made available, to know that that could come off our shoulders, that we could continue taking that one foot in front of another step, to make sure that, again, every request that came in, thank God we've been able to say yes to. And it's not just a request to somebody who who's just wants to get in on the action. These are people who are also on the front lines. These are the SelfHelps. These are the other UJA-Federation networks, agencies that are themselves fielding calls for help, and that Met Council could be there really with your support. Without your support, we couldn't keep doing that. We couldn't keep saying yes. We couldn't keep showing up in the ways that we felt we needed to. And so for all that you do and did, we're just immensely grateful. And as I said, we've been able to say yes, continue to say yes to every request that's come in because of it.
So I have one final question for each of you. I think when I reflect on this time, I feel like this will end up being the hugest privilege and honor of my life to be president of UJA Federation in this moment. And I very much think that UJA was actually built for this moment because of the infrastructure that we have in place to be able to respond to the needs that we see. So I would like just each of you to say what it is like to be part of that network on the front line, and how the UJA piece and being part of, I kind of think of us as the mothership, how that has impacted things. So Jessica, we'll start with you, and then Stuart, if you would just respond right after that.
Sure. I mean, I vividly remember the call, talking to Alex Rothkon outside, for those who don't know, director of the Caring Commission, Caring Department, standing outside of our warehouse, trying to explain what was happening, and her just saying, I know, I get it, we're here with you. And for that moment, that was everything I needed, because I wasn't just talking to Alex Rothkon, I was talking to the 50,000 donors who UJA has as support, and the JCF behind them, and everybody who when she said, I hear you, we understand, we're here to support you, I felt that impact. And I feel it every day. There's literally not a day that goes by that I don't talk to my UJA Federation colleagues, or for that matter, many times a day, and certainly across the whole network. You know, we have been able to field requests again from sister agencies. We've helped open pantries at sister agencies with the help of UJA and JCF. We're expanding pantries. Like I have this poster behind me of when we opened the pantry at Hebrew Educational Society just a year ago, and talk about, thank God we had. I mean, they went from serving a couple dozen people to a couple hundred people. They're now serving nearly 1,000 people a month. To think if we hadn't made that investment, if we hadn't built that partnership, completely facilitated by UJA, but really managed on the ground by our shared teams. Being part of the network has been incredible. I do want to also acknowledge in April, when we were literally fielding calls nonstop about the request for home delivery, we too recognized that Holocaust survivors had a very acute need, and working with a whole array of UJA Federation partners, brought in referrals and requests, and we are now distributing food via home delivery. Some of you may have seen the spot on New York One today, with a partnership with Arrow, to over 2,000 Holocaust survivors twice weekly. And we brought in those referral requests again from our sister agencies to say, who is your most vulnerable, who doesn't have other needs, other services that SelfHelp and others may offer, who can we make sure doesn't fall through the cracks during these important and critical times. And that is also a reflection of that great partnership. So the list goes on. We're so grateful to be a part of the network.
Thank you, Jessica. And Stuart, I don't know if there's anything that you would like to add to that.
Oh, capital N for network is what I would add. You know, as one of the leaders of an agency, you know, you immediately think in a moment of crisis about the clients, about the employees, about the impact on families of both of those populations. And then you turn about a nanosecond later to, you know, organizational stability. And one of the things that allowed us to be stable was the network. We knew exactly where to turn. We too made the call to UJA. It may have been actually UJA calling us before we called them even. And the resources of UJA, I mean, we tend to focus on the, you know, the immediacy of the clients, but UJA served as a central information bureau for all of us. There were so many questions that we all had, and we knew there was comfort in making the call to UJA for that information. They were tremendous advocates for government, for those of us that have government funding, to ensure that government was still connected and not going to implode itself. The webinars that UJA was able to mount, I mean, again and again, which gave us a broader breadth of what was going on in the larger world. And I must say, and I think Jessica referenced this, they were proactive. UJA was proactive in bringing the network together. And then after being proactive and calling us, and Amy referred to this in your remarks, the weekly calls, the bi-weekly calls, but the monitoring that went on as a result, so that it could be titrated, as the pandemic evolved. And the last thing I would say is that the network is a trusted resource. We are so unsure of so much information that we have been receiving these days. Where do we turn and who do we turn to? But when it came from UJA, it was trusted. So I thank you.
Thank you. So I think for me, this call represents exactly how wonderful solutions are created. I think UJA plays the role in having an overview of what the issues are and how to solve them. You have heard from the partners on the ground who make those solutions happen. And we are convened under the umbrella of the Jewish Communal Fund, which is the philanthropic partner that helps to provide the money that makes these solutions possible. So I feel like you've seen the best of all three parts of what makes it possible to change the world. You see the thinkers and the strategic people who have ideas and solutions and are the overseer of these solutions. You have the partners on the ground who implement the solutions, and you have represented here the philanthropic partners that make it all possible. So it is with great joy that I turn now the program over, after thanking Jessica and Stuart, to Dan Blaser, who actually chairs that special fund that we have referenced throughout this call that made so much of what we heard about possible. So Dan, representing JCF, I cannot thank you enough, and turn it over to you to conclude our program.
Thanks so much, Amy. It's always a privilege to serve as chair of the Special Gifts Fund, but especially so when I get to hear how impactful our work has been, as Jessica and Stuart described in their conversation with Amy. Chairing the Special Gifts Fund is a very rewarding role for me, as I'm able to have an even greater impact than just making gifts from my own fund at the Jewish Communal Fund. Before I discuss how JCF used our Special Gifts Fund to provide crisis relief, let me zoom out and explain a little bit about JCF and the Special Gifts Fund. Our Special Gifts Fund is similar to an endowment fund. JCF charges a modest administrative fee on our assets under management, which are currently about $2 billion. This fee generates revenue, enabling JCF to cover all operating costs, make an annual grant of $2 million to UJA-Federation's annual campaign, and make contributions to the Special Gifts Fund. The $2 million grant to UJA is unrestricted and enables UJA to use the money where it is needed most. In addition to the unrestricted gift, each year, JCF's trustees, in consultation with UJA-Federation professionals, make special project-specific grants to Jewish charities in the New York area from our Special Gifts Fund. Typically, these gifts are directed to capital projects, scholarships, and programs for Holocaust survivors. I think we're going to have some slides. If we could have the first slide, please. Thank you. We had already started the process of selecting our 2020 Special Gifts Fund grants as the COVID pandemic beset our community. It quickly became clear how much of an impact the crisis was having, and we immediately pivoted to focus on COVID-related relief. We had a number of virtual meetings in the harrowing last 2 weeks of March to select the grants. And as Amy mentioned, just before Passover, we made an emergency grant of $1 million from the Special Gifts Fund to UJA-Federation to help Met Council fight food insecurity, provide assistance to Holocaust survivors and single parents who were impacted by COVID-19. Note that this was in addition to our $2 million unrestricted grant to UJA. Our generous fund holders, simply by virtue of using JCF to organize their charitable giving, made this response possible. Next slide, please. Over the past decade, nearly $20 million has been granted from JCF's Special Gifts Fund to support Jewish communal organizations. Some grants that stand out include funding digital choice food pantries at the Sid Jacobson JCC, the Central Queens Y, and as Amy discussed, the recently dedicated Queens Hub. Helping to create the indoor recreational center at Camp Ramapo for children with special needs, and providing camp and day school scholarships for children from lower income homes. For almost 50 years, JCF has managed a donor-advised fund program, which is a low-cost vehicle for making your charitable giving simpler and more tax efficient. JCF is a 501c3 tax-exempt public charity. So when you contribute to JCF, you are entitled to receive the maximum charitable tax deduction allowed by law. You will no longer have the burden of record keeping and saving receipts, as the only receipt you'll need is the one from JCF, no matter how many grants you make to your charities. JCF's charitable giving funds give you the opportunity to recommend grants to IRS qualified charities, both sectarian and non-sectarian, on your own timeline. You can invest your donor-advised fund assets in a variety of asset classes on JCF's robust investment platform, and tax-free earnings will be rebalanced into your fund. When the world came to a grinding halt with the coronavirus crisis, I knew that I could turn to JCF to get much needed funds to the charities that were important to me. With all the uncertainty brought on by the crisis, it was reassuring to know that I could use my donor advised fund to do something quickly to help. And working with JCF is always easy. It's convenient, it's efficient, the website is well designed, my mom can navigate it, and it really enables you to focus on your charitable giving instead of the record keeping and administrative tasks. For me, it was a no-brainer to start a fund at JCF over 15 years ago. I loved that the small administrative fee helps to generate our community gift to UJA and supports grants from the Special Gifts Fund. It's this communal impact of the Jewish Communal Fund and a significant double bottom line. For information on how you can maximize your Jewish communal impact and reduce the administrative burden of your charitable giving, visit jcfny.org. And now we have time for one final question for Stuart and Jessica. Jessica, you mentioned while talking to Amy about funds drying up and increased need going forward. Our donors are asking what actions would you recommend they take to help you respond to the ongoing crisis?
Sure, thank you. Well, first and foremost, I would say wear a mask. Everyone should protect themselves and each other. The work that JCF and UJA have enabled needs to continue. And as our government sources pull back, UJA and JCF have been a big part of completing that pie for us. And so essentially what we're seeing is that we're going to be missing a big chunk of that pie. And so to the extent that individuals can continue to support the work of making sure that New Yorkers have access to emergency food supports, you should also call your elected officials. New York City Council was very helpful in ultimately approving $25 million, $6 million of which went to Met Council, a very significant portion. And that funding is set to expire this month. So call your electeds, but also know that we have to work to make sure that we can sustain this level of support. And the funding that has been provided by UJA and JCF not only allow us to continue to provide for emergency food needs, but also, as I think Stuart actually really alluded to, allow us the flexibility to do that as we need. So just as a brief comment, you know, the city right now is very focused on fresh produce, which is lovely and amazing. And we've been getting tremendous donations of fresh produce. We want to be able to use our dollars flexibly to know that, okay, we don't have to spend money on produce right now. We should be spending money on fresh protein or even frozen protein, things that we don't get from other sources. Or alternatively, we need to scale up on PPE, or we need to scale up our operations at our warehouse. That going back to that feeling of being on the front lines back in March and knowing that we were doing what was right, you know, I hope we can convey to you that we really are, we know what's needed. We just need the resources to be able to do it and to be able to act without question, without hesitation, so that we can continue to support, as I said, our staff, our pantries, our operations, and most importantly, the clients who need us. So give flexibly, call your electeds, and as I said, protect yourself and each other.
Thank you. And Stuart, the same question to you, and I would, you can answer it however you want. But I know you talked about the virtual senior center when you were talking to Amy, and of course donations are important, and I hope you touch on that. But are there other opportunities to get involved in ways that our donors can work with and help self-help?
So it is critical, life and death critical to us, that we not let our guard down. I mean, we are getting tired of this, but we can't let our guard down. We focus on the infection rates. One sort of subtle underlying issue are seniors in particular, and certainly Holocaust survivors, rely on their children and other family members for support. It is under the radar. We don't know about it, obviously. But what we have been seeing is that because of unemployment or other financial implications, the survivors are no longer getting that support from their children. So funding and emergency cash will continue to be very important. we also, at some point we will be through this pandemic. And so I would hope that we will focus on now what we have to do for clients and for staff, to ensure that they will be able to get through and weather the storm and continue. The virtual senior center, Daniel, thank you. You asked me to mention it. I thought I've said it enough, but I can't say it enough, because the fact that it is combating isolation, it existed before the pandemic. It's only been exacerbated now. It's going to continue after the pandemic. So focusing on the after period is really important, and support for that. We are building a model that is sustainable, but we are not there yet. Sustainable meaning getting people who can pay to pay for it, getting government to pay for it as well. But in the meantime, we do need support to carry us through this period while it reaches sustainability. So thank you again to JCF, UJA.
Our pleasure. Thank you, Stuart. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Thanks to Zoya for kicking us off, and our wonderful speakers, AB Bressman, the president of UJA-Federation of New York, Stuart Kaplan, CEO of SelfHelp Community Services, and Jessica Chait, managing director, food programs for the Met Council. On behalf of the JCF and UJA communities, we appreciate the time you spent updating us on all of the services and programs that our community provided to help those impacted by the crisis, and is continuing to help as the crisis continues. If you have questions or would like more information, please reach out to Ellen Israelson at JCF, and she can be reached at ellen@jcfny.org, or to Susan Silverman at UJA, and she can be reached at silverman@ujafedny.org. And check out metcouncil.org and selfhelp.net to learn more about Met Council and Self-Help and the work they do. Thank you all for joining us. I wish you a wonderful Thanksgiving. I hope that you'll stay safe, wear masks, as Jessica said, and I do hope that we can all be together in person one day very soon. Thank you.